Hello, my name is Gokey Gamer, coach of the Milwaukee Medichams, and this is log number 6 of testing the power of these Paradox Pokemon for Professor Turo. I've been recruited by the professor to help gather intel on these iron Pokemon by battling with them in this Oldu association, and in exchange I've been promised a championship title as these Pokemon are just that powerful. This week we're going to be battling the coach by the name of Rose and the Los Vegas Rotoms. Now, to be quite frank, the team that we'll be going up against is going to be quite hard to take down. And I've also heard that Rose is quite the expert battler. The Las Vegas Rotoms have the team Iron Boulder, Sandy Shocks, Pecharunt, Rillaboom, Hawlucha, Lokix, Caporaja, Delphox, Dachshund, Rotom Wash, and finally an Appleton. The TERA captains consist of Delphox with the TERA Fire, Fairy, and Grass types, Dachshund with the TERA Steel, Fighting, and Fairy types, and Appleton with the Dragon, Steel, and Fairy types. Not only does this team have fantastic speed tiers and synergy, especially with Rillaboom's Grassy Surge ability, but they also have a lot of, quite frankly, terrifying threats like TERA Delphox, Pecharunt, Lokix, and Iron Boulder, to name a few. Not to mention the fact that Iron Boulder was apparently one of the Iron Mons stolen from the professor all those weeks ago and gifted to this team, hence why they have it now. In terms of what I'm expecting to make an appearance, I'm thinking it's going to be Iron Boulder, Pecharunt, Rillaboom, Hawlucha, Sandy Shocks, and either TERA Delphox or Dachshund. This game will be quite tough, especially since the professor insisted on taking Iron Valiant this week for unknown research purposes. As a result, this will be the first week we are not bringing Iron Valiant. But if any team can take Rose out, it's our team. So without any further ado, let's talk about what I'm bringing and why I'm bringing it. The first Pokemon that we've got on this team is none other than the always deadly Iron Thorns. Holding the Lumberry to prevent a Will-O-Wisp or Toxic, this is going to be our dedicated lead with the moves Supercell, Slam, Ice Punch, Dragon Dance, and Earthquake to round things out. Similar to last week, we're also running Max Defense, enough speed to outspeed Iron Boulder at +1, and the TERA Flying type to help out defensively, resisting any super effective Grass, Fighting, and Ground type moves being thrown my way. This is our dedicated lead because I want Iron Thorns to do what they did all the way back during week 1. Start the game off with a +1 boost and defeat as many Pokemon as possible. At this point, we all know what Iron Thorns can do, so let's hope my opponent doesn't come up with any surprises to stop Mechagodzilla in their tracks. The next Pokemon that I wanted to talk about is none other than the other Ironmon we're bringing, Iron Moth. Holding the Clear Amulet this week, this Pokemon is meant to completely stop Pecharunt in its tracks, and we've got the moves Fiery Dance, Energy Ball, Morning Sun, and Discharge. Like I said earlier, Pecharunt can't do anything versus Iron Moth, and we can chip it down in return with Fiery Dance. This set also looks extremely solid into a lot of the other Pokemon on my opponent's team as well. Obviously, Hawlucha and Iron Boulder outspeeding, as well as well-baked body TERA Steel Dachshund could prove to be a pretty big issue for us, but hopefully it doesn't come down to that. Following Hawaiian Pizza is another one of our defensive Pokemon, Derp the Quagsire. Holding the Rocky Helmet this week, we once again have the Water Absorb ability alongside Max HP and Defense, as well as the moves Earth Power, Toxic, Recover, and Stealth Rock. This set is meant to completely wall Rotom Wash, as well as any physical threats like Hawlucha, Iron Boulder, and Lokix. If we can set up Stealth Rocks, then they'll most likely be up for the rest of the game, since my opponent's only form of hazard removal is Hawlucha, which, combined with Toxic and Rocky Helmet, could really put a dent into my opponent's team. And this week, I really do think that Derp will be able to accomplish that goal. Next up is our fourth bring, which is going to be the return of King the Weavile. Back from vacation after the battle versus the Sun team last week, this week we've got only stab moves, being Throat Chop, Triple Axle, Swords Dance, and Ice Shard with max attack and enough speed to outspeed a non-scarfed or boosted Iron Boulder. The reason we don't have knockoff this week is not just because of Iron Boulder and Sandy Shocks possibly running the booster energy, but also because it synergizes better with the final Pokemon on our team. Swords Dance plus Ice Shard is there specifically so that we can endgame sweep more reliably, especially against Pokemon like Rillaboom and Hawlucha. Obviously, some Pokemon like Caporaja and TERA Steel Dachshund could provide some issues, but I do sincerely hope that the King will be able to reclaim his crown after our Week 4 loss. After King is our other TERA captain, being Carboniferous the YANMEGA. This time finally bringing TERA Ground and Speed Boost, we've got the moves Bug Buzz, Air Slash Protect, and TERA Blast complemented with the Throat Spray as per usual. We've also got max special attack and enough speed to outspeed Iron Boulder at +1, hence the Protect tech. Protect could also be useful to stall out grassy terrain turns if it comes down to that. Not much more needs to be said about this set. This is the first time we are bringing TERA Ground though, and I'm excited to hopefully see it pop off this week, as long as I don't feel the need to TERA Iron Thorns first. If Sandy Shocks, Iron Boulder, Pecharunt, Caporaja, and Delphox show up, I'll be prioritizing YANMEGA's TERA, and if Rillaboom, Hawlucha, Lokix, and Appleton show up, I'll be prioritizing Iron Thorns. Both TERA captains look absolutely amazing in this matchup, it just depends on the team that my opponent brings. The last Pokemon that we're bringing this week is a bit of a surprise, Tumbler the Brambleghast. This week, hoping to be the reliable endgame sweep, we're holding the Choice Scarf and the Infiltrator ability alongside the moves Poltergeist, Phantom Force, Power Whip, and Shadow Sneak, with enough speed to outspeed any non-Choice Scarfed Iron Boulder, especially since my opponent doesn't have a normal type. I'm hoping this moveset will simply win me the game. Poltergeist is the main reason we're running Throat Chop over Knockoff on Weavile, and Shadow Sneak is there for the same reason as Weavile, just in case we need to click that button versus a priority, Scars, or an unburdened Hawlucha. This set honestly looks extremely solid into my opponent's team, so hopefully Bramblegeist will finally be able to show off his own strength this week. And that is the complete team we're bringing for this match. Arguably one of our toughest matchups thus far, especially since we're not bringing Iron Valiant this week. I am admittedly quite nervous for this game. However, I do feel quite confident in this team, so hopefully they'll continue to prove themselves not just to me, but also the Professor as well. Without any further ado, let's go ahead and head into the battle. Once we log into the battle, I take notice that both Darkspawn and Sandy Shocks didn't end up showing up to this battle, so Iron Moth has quite the nice matchup, but I also see major threats such as the combination of Rillaboom, Iron Boulder, and Pecharunt. So this is going to be quite the tough game. I stick with my lead, Iron Thorns, as my opponent leads Low Kicks, arguably one of the better leads for us. After debating if I should click my TERA button or not, I decide to stay in and click Dragon Dance as my opponent ends up clicking U-Turn, doing a decent chunk of damage and giving my opponent the opportunity to switch into their Rotom Wash, putting me in an interesting situation. Based on how Rotom Wash was brought in, I'm assuming that this Rotom Wash is max HP and max defense, which means a Supercell Slam would only do about half. A Hydro Pump would do enough to KO me thanks to the U-turn chip from Low Kicks if I don't TERA, but if I do TERA, then Thunderbolt would most likely do enough, and I also wouldn't be able to TERA YANMEGA, which looks quite amazing in this matchup once Rillaboom goes down. Also, if my opponent does decide to go for a Hydro Pump, they risk Quagsire switching in for free, as well as a miss, and if they go for a Will-O-Wisp for the most neutral play, we're holding the Lumberry to get rid of a possible burn. So as a result, knowing that Iron Thorns' role was simply to be the dedicated lead, I opt to not TERA and hope my opponent either overpredicts or misses their Hydro Pump. Well, that's certainly not the most ideal situation, but we can work around that. This gives me a free switch into Quagsire as Rotom also reveals that they're holding leftovers, putting their HP back above half. Unsurprisingly, my opponent decides to switch into Rillaboom as I click Stealth Rock, making sure that hazards stay up on my opponent's side of the field for the rest of the match, since the Rotom forms lost defog in this generation. And now, it's time for another crucial turn. If I stay in and Rillaboom goes for a Grassy Glide, then it's bye-bye Quagsire, which opens up Rotom and Iron Boulder a lot more against the rest of my team. If my opponent goes for a knockoff, then whatever swaps in will lose their held item. And if my opponent clicks High Horsepower, it won't do much damage to Quagsire and absolutely zero damage to YANMEGA, but it will OHKO Iron Moth. Basically, I have a 1 in 3 chance for this next turn to be unfavorable for me. Grassy Glide versus Quagsire, Knockoff versus YANMEGA, losing my Throat Spray, and High Horsepower versus Iron Moth are all heavily unfavorable situations that will severely dent my team. My guess is that my opponent is clicking the most neutral play, Knockoff, as it can deal solid damage against all of my Pokemon, so as a result, I decide to switch into Iron Moth. Let's hope I get this prediction right. So, this is a very bad situation for us. Losing Iron Moth in this way is extremely detrimental as I now lose an extremely solid win con and one of my best answers into Pecharunt, leaving my opponent with 6 Pokemon, most with full health, and me with 4 Pokemon in a very uphill battle to pull this game back. The one fortunate thing about both my Ironmons going down is this gives me the freest switch into Carboniferous to YANMEGA, as Rillaboom can't really do anything versus me if my opponent didn't bring a rock move, and I can click Bug Buzz to trigger my Throat Spray and OHKO Rillaboom in return. Thankfully, this works flawlessly, as while Rillaboom does live thanks to the held Tanga Berry, weakening my super effective bug type attack, the returning knockoff only does about a quarter of my HP, and we also get a free speed boost thanks to our ability, well, speed boost. Since Bug Buzz is essentially a free button click here, I decide to click it again and not TERA quite yet due to Grassy Glide, which is exactly what my opponent clicks, dealing just a minuscule amount of damage to me and picking up a kill for our team, while also further boosting our speed, confirming that we will now be the fastest thing on the field guaranteed. Rillaboom going down here instead of switching out is also extremely massive for us, because now we can freely TERA ground and not have to worry about stalling out the grassy terrain. This is particularly useful against the next thing that comes in, being his TERA Captain, Delphox, which loses a quarter of her HP due to the Stealth Rocks. Now once again, here is another interesting situation. Clearly I go for TERA Ground to get rid of my weakness to Fire. However, Delphox's TERAs actually matter a lot here. If it's TERA Fire, then TERA Ground, TERA Blast will KO. If it's TERA Grass, then Bug Buzz and Air Slash will both KO. And if it's TERA Fairy, the worst out of the bunch, then TERA Blast will be a roll to KO. So as a result, when I click the TERA button, I opt to go for a Protect to see what my opponent TERA's into. Granted, I didn't have to TERA here, and in hindsight I don't think I should have since that reveals my hand earlier than I needed to. But in the end, it turns out to not matter too much as my opponent also reveals their TERA, and that they were actually rocking the Power Herb Solar Beam set, specifically predicting the Quagsire's switch. This also burns Delphox's Power Herb too, meaning Quagsire is now a much safer switch if needed against Delphox. Unfortunately though, due to the grassy terrain recovery, Delphox is now barely out of range to die to a TERA Blast, so now we're going to be forced to tank a hit, which we might not be able to do. While Flamethrower will most likely be a roll in my favor to live, a Fire Blast or Overheat will pick up the KO versus me, leaving me in a very rough position. So without any choice, I decide to click the TERA Blast button, doing a massive amount of damage. This is massive for us. Depending on the rest of my opponent's team, Carboniferous could just 6-0 sweep. Because of that Fire Blast miss, we're able to safely pick up the KO versus Delphox, KOing the TERA Captain and bringing his lead low kicks back in. Knowing that a first impression is heading my way, I go for a Protect, correctly guarding myself against the incoming hit, and then the next turn picking up the KO in return with a Bug Buzz. All of a sudden, we went from my opponent having 6 mons, most with full HP, to only 3 Pokemon, one of which is heavily chipped. We also outspeed my opponent's entire team because of Speed Boost, Rocks will prevent any Pokemon from taking advantage of a possible Focus Sash, and because of our +1 special attack buff, we can OHKO most Pecharunt and Iron Boulder sets, and Rotom Wash is chipped enough for a Bug Buzz to finish it off. The only thing that can stop me now is a Shuka Berry Pecharunt. While we do deal massive damage even after the Shuka Berry and Malignant Chain doesn't come anywhere close to knocking me out, unfortunately Pecharunt lands the 50% chance to poison, and as a result, Pecharunt's special ability Poison Puppeteer ends up triggering, which confuses our large Dragonfly and puts him on a timer. Now, granted, if I don't hit myself in Confusion, then we can still fully sweep with YANMEGA, and even if we end up hitting ourselves in Confusion at some point, then at the very least both King the Weavile and Derp the Quagsire can still win the battle really reliably. All we need is to land this first hit. Well, so much for the YANMEGA sweep. Pecharunt is able to pick up the KO against us with a Hex, putting us back to an even 3 versus 3 matchup. Not the worst situation, but Pecharunt is really going to prove to be quite the tough opponent to take out. Because Throw Chop on Weavile is a bit of a roll and there's no way for me to one-shot Iron Boulder without a Swords Dance boost, I decide to give Tumbler the chance to shine. So I switch him in to hopefully take out the Haunted Berry with a Phantom Force. And as the Haunted Tumbleweed disappears... So, not gonna lie, I may or may not have forgotten that Pecharunt can do that. While Phantom Force is able to reliably two-shot Pecharunt, we aren't going to win this 1v1 because Pecharunt is able to land another Poison and Confusion combo. And now, it looks like there's a pretty good chance of Pecharunt winning the rest of this game. Knowing that Pecharunt is going to go for another recover and that trying to beat this berry with his Tumbleweed is futile, I decide I have to switch into King. And as I correctly predict that my opponent clicks recover, I know what I have to do. I have to risk the Poison and Confusion combo to go for a Swords Dance. As long as Pecharunt goes down, Derp and Tumbler can reliably win the game. So praying for the 50% poison chance to fall in my favor, I tell King to dance. And once again, the rolls fall in my favor, as this time we do manage to win the coin flip, meaning that despite getting crit with the Malignant Chain, we will now be able to KO Pecharunt and force my opponent to bring in the Pokemon they stole from the Professor, being Iron Boulder. Now, King could win the game here depending on this set. While we do outspeed Iron Boulder naturally and we don't see the booster energy pop, this extremely terrifying Pokemon could still be Scarfed. But, knowing that if they're not Scarfed, King wins the game, I click Throat Chop. And that, my friends, is what we call GG's. Because there's no way for Rotom Wash to outspeed, Weavile is able to easily finish off the game, barely scraping by with a 3-0 victory. Now, granted, while we did get very lucky in this game, I'd still argue our luck was fairly balanced. Carboniferous might have dodged a Fire Blast from Delphox, but Iron Thorn still died to a Hydro Pump. King might have won that coin flip, but Pecharunt won 2 coin flips before that, even preventing the YANMEGA 6-0 sweep, while also winning the Confusion chance, as had Carboniferous not hit themselves in Confusion, then he would have been able to pick up at least 1 or 2 more KOs before going down, also guaranteeing us the win. All in all, while far from our cleanest game, I still felt pretty decent about these results, all things considered. And it felt pretty good to remind our opponents that the Iron Mons aren't the only Pokemon that can be major threats on my team. Regardless, that will be the end of this log. If you're still watching, thank you so much for your support. If you guys enjoyed this battle and want to see more, then leave a like, comment, and subscribe as it helps our research on these Iron Mons immensely. I would also like to shout out Rose's channel as well. Their channel and their side of the battle will be linked down below. Please be sure to check them out. GG's to them again, and I wish them luck for the rest of the season ahead. Also be sure to check out some of our other Draft League content for more battles from me. If you want to show support financially and earn some unique perks, then be sure to check out my Ko-Fi link down below as well. With that, this is the end of the log. See you all next week for our Week 7 game. Peace out, mates. Listen, Professor, how was I supposed to predict that my opponent would go for the exact moves that they went for when it was all essentially a coin flip? Alright, with all due respect, I've given you loads of extremely valuable data over the last several weeks. You'll live if one of these weeks the Iron Mons don't shine. Okay, fine. I understand. I don't know why getting this data is so important to you or what you're going to do with it, but I promise I'll gather more info for you in the upcoming weeks. Jeez, I don't know what's been up with that guy recently. He is so hyper-obsessed with his research. It's like he only cares about himself or something.